Hi class, this video will be about functions. Functions allow us to reuse the code throughout our program that we don't want to have to write over and over again, and it prevents us from having to redo complicated things more than once. Let's get started. So, for the first example, and also to explain, I'm on REPL.it because I initially made this video on Trinket and ran into this spacing issue that you guys have ran into before as well. So if you guys would like to use REPL.it, you're more than welcome to do so. You can go sign up, it's free. You go to new REPL at the top right, you put 2.7, not standard Python, or you'll find that you're in Python 3. Things won't work quite the same. It likes to generate an automated name for you. You can call it whatever you want. I've already created one, and it's called functions. So I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel here. But you would type something in and you'd click create. It will bring you to this page, which you guys should be familiar with. So go ahead and do that. Okay. So let's get started with functions. So functions, again, they allow us to create usable pieces of code, so we don't have to type things over and over again. What I decided would be really helpful for you guys is to provide you with an example of how you could use functions inside your budget program. So the first thing I'm going to do is, one of the things that we have to do quite a few times is print the top portion of our budget. So let's create a function to do that for us, so we don't have to write it over and over again. We can just reuse it. In Python, the way that we start a function declaration is with the keyword def, D-E-F. That essentially tells the interpreter, or the programming that runs our code, this is where I'm going to start a function. You then provide it a name, so we'll call it print budget header, and we put parentheses on there to tell it it's a function, and then we put colon, which says this is the start of our function. Anything that comes after this that's indented needs to be run when the function is called. You'll see when I hit enter, it automatically indented. It gets moved in a little bit. So let's build our standard way of printing out our budget header. So we'll say print equals, and we'll do that 35 of those. And we're going to use the percent minus 10s, percent minus 10s, percent minus 10s, percent, and we'll have to pass them in that way. Item, monthly, and yearly. This should look pretty familiar to you guys. We've done this quite a bit before. And we'll do equals 35 more times. Okay, so you'll notice it has this little faint line here on REPL, which lets us know that this is part of the defined function of print budget header. So by itself, if I start this program, it will do nothing. So just to show you that, nothing happens. And that's because we've created this function, but we haven't actually used it. Just like print is a function, we have created a function. So in order to use it, we actually have to write this out. So you'll notice that we can call it just like this, just like we use print, but we're not passing anything to it. So we just leave the empty parentheses. And if we hit run, you'll notice it prints this really nice budget header for us. And again, you can adjust the spacing however you wish to. I'm just using these numbers as the example. So what's really nice about this is it allows us to put things wherever we want to. So, and if I call it again, you'll notice that it will print it again. Now we don't want that, not for our budget, but we do maybe want to come in here and say, here's a very great function we can use. Def print row, and row name row cost. Oh, let's change it to item. Print item. Item name, item cost. And again, we put that colon right at the end there. Auto indents for us. And let's do % -10s, and then we'll do $, put a space there, and %.2f, and then space %.2f, with the $sign there, and we'll say -10, and we'll do -10 here. And that should print it out in the line formatting that we want. Alright, and now we need the item name, item cost, and what if we were to do item cost times 12? Well, that's really neat, because when we use it, it will print whatever we pass to it lined up for us. We don't have to print it more than one time. But we need to get those things. So if we think about our previous video about inputs, let's get the item. So item, or first item, input, we'll do raw input because it's a string. And it does matter on REPL because it wants you to use the right stuff, which is pretty nice. Please enter first item name and first item cost. Input, enter, well, first, let's just put that in there. %s:/s cost, like that. And we're going to pass in the first item name so that it prints it for us and asks for the cost. Alright, now that so thinking programmatically, once we get these variables, we'll want to print them out. So let's say print item. And we'll pass it the first item and the first item's cost. Okay, well, let's run this and see what happens. Okay, great. We have to enter the name of our first item. So we're going to have our car budget. And oh, we messed something up here. One got 2 arguments. Shouldn't be a comma. So we'll swap this out for a %. And let's try it again. Car budget. And what is the car's cost a month? We'll say we pay $250 a month for the car. And you'll see, because we have these functions, all of this stuff is automatically done for us, and it prints out the stuff that we need. Let's adjust the alignment here just a smidge. So put you -9, we'll shift you over, and we'll put you 8. So let's run this again. Try that. Car, $250. And that looks pretty good. Let's make this 9 as well, though. Run that. Car, $250. There we go. That's close enough. So, as we can see here, we can get this to print out. Well, how is this really nice for us? Well, we can come in here again and say second item is raw input, and we'll say second item name. And we're going to adjust this just a smidge. Monthly cost. And we'll say, in fact, we can even just copy this line, paste it here, and change this to second item cost. Otherwise, we'll override this one. That won't go well for us. And we'll change this as well, so we get the right name. And when we run this, we'll get those values. And we were going to want to print those values again. So print item, second item, and second item cost. And if we do that, let's go ahead and run this again. We have our car budget. We said that was $250. And we'll have a food budget. And we'll say that's $850. And if we hit enter, it prints it out super nicely for us, does all these calculations for us, and we only had to write it once instead of multiple times. So you can see where the power of functions really comes in here. And let's just adjust this real quick to make it super nice. So car, 250, food, 750. And the alignment now is exactly where we want it. But again, the power here is that we only had to do this one time instead of writing this entire line out a whole bunch of times. So functions really help us modulate these things. And we can do things like this, where after this we put print with a space there. And maybe we want one just above it as well. And so this last time that we run it, we'll see car, 250, food, 750. And now we have these line spacings above it, so we can get these really nice printouts. It provides us a really great way to, again, modularize that code, keep it separate. And the nice thing is, we can print them in any way that we want to. Let's say, oh, I want to print my second item first. We can cut this line, put it before it, and run it. We can still put car 250. Now we're going to do, oh, that's going to make things interesting. And we do food and 250. And again, it took our name, but it printed it second. You can move things wherever you want to with functions because we're calling them. And so we don't get this weird, how do we align things? We can get our things here, and we're good to go. Now, functions also have one more thing that we need to talk about. They have the ability to return values. Well, how is this useful? Well, let me show you. So def get item and value. And we're not going to pass it anything, but we are going to return it. So this is where this gets even more nice. Now down here, how we're writing it out, well, we can change that as well. Raw input. Well, let's just do this. Item name equals raw input. Let's go ahead and say well, let's do this. Iterator. And what an iterator is just the current count. So let's just go ahead and try this. So we'll do %d period item name. And then we'll do item cost equals raw input. Or no, just input. Because again, we're getting a number. And we will say %d. Oh, well, we'll still do the s. That's a good way to do it. %s is %item name. But we want the cost, so cost, monthly cost. Okay, and now we're going to return both of these items. This is one of the strengths Python has, is you can return multiple values. What we're going to do for this is use a tuple. We'll say item name and item cost will be returned. And it will return both of those things wherever they're called. The nice thing here is we can say, erase this, first item name, or well, we just call it first item, and first item cost equals, and we'll say 1, and we'll do it again, second item cost equals Let's get item and value for 2. Let's run it and see what happens. %d. Okay, I've got an error here where I did not pass in that. Let's go ahead and stop that and run it again. Number 1, item name. We will say I'll do car again, that's fine. And then the car's monthly budget cost. Oh, I did not really make that super great. So let's try this again. Car, $250. And then 2, because we passed the 2 in here. Fruit, $50 a month. And it will still print it for us. So this allows us to get 2 values back instead of 1. Or if you really wanted to make it, you could call a function to do both of these things, like this. And then instead of providing the iterator, we could just say item name multiple times, so on and so forth. And it allows us to incrementally go about and get these things via a function, because the return will return that thing. Well, let's say we just want to get the names, or just the value costs. Let's just do the costs. Let's just do the cost. Oh. We'll pass in the name here so that we can make it look pretty. This will hopefully make it some sense for you. So we're only return 1 instead of multiple, because when we return multiple, it will unload them left to right. But let's just get the cost. So first item will be first item. And then we'll say, pass the first item in here. And we will call this just get value. Get cost. So now we have get cost here, which will get the cost for us. And we can do the same thing here, second item. And we'll get the second item cost from our function. And if we run this again, we'll get first item and we'll say car, $350 for the car's budget. And we'll do fruit and we'll do $80 for that. And it will calculate all that for us. If we want to move car back to the top, we can. And this is really nice. Eventually, we'll be getting into loops, which will allow us to make this process even shorter, because we can do something where we can, instead of making these every single time, we can use a list or a dictionary to store these values. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the semester, but hopefully this has helped you learn a little bit more about functions. Thanks, guys.